Welcome to Horsefly Chronicles Radio with Julia and Philip Siracusa. Sponsored by Carnation. Airing live on United Public Radio Network on 105.3 and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. This show's opening has been produced, edited, narrated by Gwen Luckett at gluckett.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Monday night segment of Horsefly Chronicles Radio with myself, Julia Siracusa, and Phil Siracusa. We're broadcasting live from the United Paranormal Radio Network on 105.3 FM and 107.7 from New Orleans. We're also live on Roku, so you can watch us live from your TV. We're fully sponsored by Carnation, so we want to thank them for their sponsorship. We love them. You'll have to do a few things in order to participate. Go over to YouTube channel, UFO Paranormal Radio. You can go to all of the Facebook stations, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, UFO Undercover with Joe Montaldo, News on the Flip Side, Twitch, SoundCloud, Podbean, and of course, Horsefly Chronicles Radio. And if you have any questions for our guest, please ask. So tonight, guys, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties with my camera, so please excuse that. So please let's welcome another fabulous guest to the show, Ms. Angela Moreno. She's a paranormal investigator, and she's also the founder of the Crimson Curse Paranormal Researchers. Through childhood experiences, she wanted to learn more and build a stronger connection to the other side. In 2015, the Crimson Curse Paranormal Researchers came together. So please let's welcome her to the show.
Welcome.
Hi.
Thank you. Hi.
I am so distracted today, so please excuse me. Angela, take us to the beginning of your story. What happened to you, in your childhood? I know you had a few childhood experiences that kind of like drove you into the paranormal.
Yes. The first one that I can remember is I was 5 years old when my grandfather passed away. And I remember my mom being extremely sad, and I didn't know why. And my dad, who had always been my greatest supporter and someone I could always talk to about anything, explained to me, that my grandfather had died. And the night of his funeral, I woke up and I had sleep paralysis. I could open my eyes, I could move my head, but I couldn't move the rest of my body. And my grandfather was sitting at the edge of the bed. Now, back then, we lived in a 2-bedroom house. In the bedroom I slept in, there were 2 queen beds. On one was myself and my sister. On the other one, my mom and dad. And in the second bedroom, my brother slept in there. So when I opened my eyes and I looked down, I could see my grandfather sitting at the edge of my mom's bed. And so I turned my head and I looked at my mom, and she was looking right at me, but I couldn't say anything. And then my grandfather proceeded to stand up, and he turned around and he looked at the bed my mom was laying on. He smiled. He walked over to the bed where my sister and I were laying on. And he just stood there looking at us, and he smiled. And then he walked into my brother's room, came back into our room, and then walked into our closet and disappeared. And let me tell you, that gave me closet issues from that time, because I always felt like that was the place where they could come in and out. And then that was reinforced with spooky movies once I started watching them. But as I got more into the paranormal field and I started doing researching, I realized that, the closets aren't portals, and it's just, a way for, it just happened to be where he came from. Also, my mom had an altar there of all her Catholic saints. So, that also helped him come through.
Yeah.
And then aside from that, we just, but it was at that point when I started realizing that I was communicating with people who were already deceased. And it was my dad who I would talk to, and he would help me, work my way through it. And he's also the one who helped me realize that not everything that comes through is evil. Not everything that comes through is bad. And it's just a matter of determining what is what. And we went from there. And so I've been in the field researching for well over 30 years now.
Wow. It always starts when we're young, and it really does. It makes us just like dive into the paranormal head first and try to understand, what we're going through as kids.
Yeah.
Do you meet anybody along the way that helped you understand the paranormal and, really dig deep into the research?
It was a matter of, I researched everything about it. I researched all the different spiritual paths. I learned about the different communities, especially in the areas that I do research or I have done research. Like in my area, for example, all the different in tribes that have come through, the different types and cultures that have passed through where I live, in order to understand, what is and what has been involved in the community. And I've also, looked into the different cultures. How do we treat the dead? How do we treat, what do they think of, and how do they treat paranormal experiences? Do they believe in it? Do they not believe in it? What are the different, and it's a matter of religious belief, family beliefs, cultural beliefs, and there's the history there.
Yeah.
And I go about, and I always tell everybody, my team, we prefer to investigate areas that have not been investigated before, because there's that thing I call planting the seed. You hear all these stories, people go into the same buildings talking about being touched, their hair pulled, and all this other stuff. And I feel that when you go in there with these preconceived notions, you actually experience them. So I like going into areas, our team does, so we can be a clean slate. We can have that clean slate. Or we also look at what have other people researched, and then we look for things that have not been explained yet.
Okay.
Not been explained. I like that. You said that the closet was a portal, portals, closets.
Well, at that time, I thought it was, because that's where my grandfather left through the portal, and which was the closet. But then later on, as I started, researching, I see it as my mom. It wasn't the closet. It was probably the corner where my mom had all her religious statues, because that was a place that she would pray. She put a lot of emotion into that corner. And so, I've done research on that too, where if there's a place and people put a lot of emotions into it, that tends to open up the veil where they can come in and out. We can speak to them. They're more, how do I say it? The signal is more strong. The signal is stronger there where there's that emotion. And that also leads me to why I don't like roadside memorials, because there's so much emotion poured into a person's worst last day of their life.
Yeah.
People come to me and they'll tell me, I keep seeing my relative who died in a car accident. and it's like they're trapped in that, where the accident happened. And then I'll go over there and there's this elaborate memorial with all these flowers and the people, continuously visit it. And so there's all this emotion put in there. And I know it's a way of healing for a lot of people, but, I sometimes explain to them and I talk to them, maybe if they loved going to the park, if they loved hiking, move their memorial to a place where they're going to be happy. Commemorate what they love to do and where they love to be, rather than the worst last day of their life here on earth.
I agree with you there. That's such a tricky thing, because I can understand the parents and the family wanting to put something in that certain spot, but I know what you mean, because when I go by there, I feel awful. I feel awful. You can actually feel what the spirit kind of feels, if that makes any sense.
Oh no, absolutely. And then when you have intuition, you feel that energy. You can feel the energy. They're sad, they're upset, they're, how do I say it? Like, you can feel the hurt.
Yeah.
The emotion, the loss, and you can feel other people's emotion and their loss when they're, with the energy that they actually put into that.
Yeah, it's real. We never really talked about that, but you're right. That's a really hard thing. I hate driving by and seeing that. It's awful.
Well, it's kind of like placement energy, where a parent feels like this is the marking of where a son or a daughter or a loved one has crossed over in an unfortunate situation. I see both sides. I guess I don't know how you act until you actually deal with it yourself, if you have to. Now, I want to get into portals really quick. What's your thought on mirrors as portals?
For me, it's the same thing. I believe if you put a lot of energy, whether it's a mirror or an area, a location, you can produce energies, and you can invite things through pretty much anything, basically, if you put that energy toward it. I know, like, history has it that mirrors were an evil thing, and they were used for this and they were used for that. But you saw that a lot when the witches would scry, when they found out witches were scrying through the mirrors. And so then it became that mirrors were evil, that mirrors hold the demons and mirrors hold bad stuff. But if they hold bad stuff, they can hold good stuff too.
That's a good point. Yeah, I agree with that. If they can hold bad stuff, they can hold good stuff too. Phil, what do you think about that?
I like mirrors, but there are some people and cultures that do not like mirrors. They don't believe you're supposed to even look in a mirror or take a photo of you. But I think that mirrors are good reflections of energy through the soul's window to see who we really are, if you can really meditate through that mirror and bring the focal point of others that come through in such a way through the subconscious mind to have a formal viewing of an essence and vibration of that person's once that did exist, such as going to a haunted location, for example. We pick up different energies of people who once lived at these locations, feelings and memories. And if you didn't know them or even meet them in the physical realm, you can feel like you did meet them at one point in time. So I think that mirrors, I do like them, and I think they do play a big part in reincarnation as well. When I was a teenager, I was fascinated with paranormal. And I went to one of these big psychics in New York, and she says, look in the mirror. Now I'm a teenager, I'm goofing around, And she says, no, look in the mirror. She's making me stare in the mirror. And then she goes, oh my. And I'm like, what? And she goes, you're not going to believe what I'm seeing. And she sees me as a Native American from way back in the day, in the 1800s. And she's seeing the man perfect of who I was. Some people have a third eye to see through those reflections of time, which to me is fascinating. And to others and other cultures, it's sacrilegious to have such a thing. So, in that sense, it's to each his own. I mean, what are you going to say? But portals, I also do believe that portals can be open in different areas with a lot of intent and belief. The same way the closet, whether you put religious figures and you pray or someone's crossed over near that area, I believe that with enough intent, a portal could be opened up almost anywhere.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that too. Um, and another thing that I studied while I was growing up is I wanted to learn more about communication with those that have passed on and feeling their energies and how to help them communicate. And not every single energy communicates the same way. And so
True.
I wanted to learn how to improve my communication with all of them as much as I could, all the way across the board. And through that, I used to go, and I still do. I go hang out at the cemetery, and I just kind of like do a meditation. I relax, and I start to feel the pull, and I follow the pull. Sometimes it's with a little bird, and I start following the little bird, but there's something about that bird at that moment that makes me want to follow it. So I follow it. And a lot of times, it's just somebody who doesn't want to be forgotten. Someone who died back in 1934 no longer has relatives, and they don't want to be forgotten. I will, take down their names and the years of birth and death, and then I do research on them. And it seems as if once I find out a little bit more about them, and I'm like, oh, hey, and here, because you can find just about everything on the internet. I learned that you had a child, and that child went on to be a grown-up, and they had 2 children, and then afterwards you just kind of like feel their energy leave. And others want more than just to be recognized. I went with a group of friends to the cemetery at one time, and we visited a grave because she had been visited by this person. So she went and found her grave, and we went to go visit it because she was telling me the story of her experience. And then a few nights later, this individual, this energy that we visited, was in my bedroom telling me that she was worried about her friend. So, I was like, okay, tell me where your friend, how do I find your friend? Tell me how to locate her. And it was another energy who had passed on. But what happened is it was an old grave. And when the wooden coffins collapsed after so many years, it creates that indentation in the ground. What ended up happening is the ground opened up and you could see the remains inside the coffin. So then at that point, I started working to try to get that plot filled again. And that took about 2 months to get it done, having to go through contacting the I don't want to say funeral homes, but the director of the cemetery, working with them, trying to figure things out. And it got to the point where I had to contact the news station just to get some sort of response or even any sort of action from the cemetery. And finally it was filled. So the news reporter decided not to air the story because the director actually did complete or they completed the task that they told us they were going to do. But it's that communication, and they all, like I said, they communicate differently. I had an experience where I communicated with a young woman who died in a fire, but it wasn't the normal, into the pool that we normally get when we communicate. She communicated by having me experience what she experienced. So it was almost like she took over. And every time I tried to move off my bed, I couldn't move. So then finally I realized what she was trying to do. She was trying to communicate her last day, her last moments, because she was trying to get a message to her mom and her baby brother. So, this is what was happening at the moment. This is why I couldn't move. I saw the fire getting closer to me, but because I had been intoxicated and she had been, someone had slipped some pills, she couldn't move, like she was paralyzed. So I felt the fire as it got closer to my hand, and then I could feel it burning. I could smell what she was smelling. And then that's when she started, like she came through her memories, like, this is what I was feeling at the time. This is what I was thinking. I wish I could tell my mom and my dad right now. This is what I wish I could tell my baby brother right now. And that was her way of communicating with me.
Wow.
It's amazing. It is amazing what they will do at a cemetery to communicate with you, because I have had rocks thrown at us. Me and my team, we were actually looking for a little girl that was involved in this case. We were looking for her grave, and we couldn't find it. We were close, but she was throwing us little rocks to try to like get us to go where she was. It was amazing and very creepy at the same time. But it is amazing what they'll do.
Oh yeah. It's been an experience being in the field. But I like to share with people in my community or wherever I visit, to show them it's not like it is on TV. Forget everything that you've ever seen on TV. It's not as exciting as it is on TV.
No, it's actually really, it's scary. I think it's a lot more scary in real life than it is on TV. I mean, they make it look a little scary, but they have that, it's TV.
Yeah, that's TV. And then it's not as, there's a lot of silence. There's a lot of quiet time during investigations.
Yeah.
And I tell them we're not walking around just talking and joking and laughing. And no, there's a lot of quiet time. There's a lot of active listening when we're out there, and, because you don't want to miss anything.
Yeah, and it takes a long time. It takes a lot longer than people think to really investigate, because, exactly, the TV, the shows, it's like an hour. I mean, it's hard to really get a lot of evidence within like a few hours. You have to really plant yourself at the location for quite a long time to get good evidence, because you don't know. We're not on their time. They're that's just the way it works. It takes a while.
And I like I said at the beginning, we like doing places that other people have not been before, because we want to see, and especially when I have new people on the team, I like to invite special guests with me. We had a DJ from Tejano Tucson Radio with us one night. We investigated a location that used to be a hotel, and then later on it was the hotel along with an alternative nightclub before it was shut down. But people like Ernest Hemingway used to stay there. That's where he found some of his, he would go to write some of his stuff. And we took this DJ with us, and I had some of my team members there with me. And we found something underneath the checkout desk, and the DJ and we were trying to get it. And all of a sudden I felt like this tug on my hair. I always wear my hair up in a bun during investigations, because, your hair can get caught in so many different things. And I don't want to, start putting out that, oh, my hair was pulled, when in fact it was just maybe caught on my shirt or my jacket or the walls or something. And so I froze, and I told her, look and see if there's anything there pulling on my hair, or I got caught in something. And there was nothing around us. And it wasn't until we left at the end of the investigation, I realized that my head was bleeding right where I felt that the hair got pulled.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, that was a really, weird experience. But that was like the only, I don't want to say it was negative, because I don't know if it was done with negative intent. It didn't hurt, because it felt like a light tug, even though eventually found out that it drew blood. But There's just different experiences. Maybe that's that who is ever trying to communicate with us, that's the only thing only way they know how to communicate.
Yeah.
So it may not have been done with negative intent.
Yeah, I mean, not everything is evil, and I think that's what we really try to teach everybody too. Just because something, like that happens doesn't mean the spirit, like you said, has evil intent. They're just trying to get your attention.
Yeah, yeah, and they all have their different ways of communications.
Yeah. So tell us about your team. How did you guys all come together and to create the team?
I had pretty much done a lot of stuff solo, but in 2015, my supervisor at the time, she had accepted another job outside of the state. And she said, for my going away party, I want to do a ghost hunt. So I brought together some of my coworkers whom I know were into the paranormal field and, were very interested. And I said, hey, would you like to, form a team so we can do a ghost hunt for this going farewell party? And they were all in. And basically that's how the team came to be, and I still have some of my team members from that night, Dina and Eric Welch. They have all the equipment, and they are a wonderful couple. They helped me. They were actually with me on one of my last investigations. There is a location here in Tucson that is basically a forgotten cemetery. When it was Tucson's third largest cemetery, and it was in operation from 1875 to 1906. And there were thousands of bodies buried there. Just in the Catholic plot alone, there was over 5,000. And eventually when they closed, because they said that it was a menace and it was a disgrace to Tucson, and Tucson was growing, the developers sold the land. They opened up 2 more cemeteries, which are now our current Holy Hope and Evergreen Cemetery. And basically they put a little article about that big out in the newspaper saying, you have until this time to come get your deceased, and we're going to charge you to move your deceased, and you have to pay for new plots. You can't do a group burial. You can't put all your family in one plot, so you have to pay for each individual. And people just decided it would cost too much to move then to have their deceased, disinterred and move somewhere else and everything. So some people opted to only move the headstones, and some people just decided they weren't going to bother with that at all. And the land was sold, and they built, right on top of it. Today, there's about 90 residences there. There's a hotel, there's apartments, and there's a restaurant called the Buena Vida Restaurant. And that's where Dina and Eric Welch were with me on that night. And we got some pretty good evidence. We captured a lot of EVP. We didn't capture much on pictures or our video, but we did get a lot of EVPs. We got a lot of little girl was the main one who kept coming through. But yeah, I mean, that whole area, there's still thousands of bodies buried there. I have a map with only a few hundred that I've been able to locate. I have about 500 death certificates of people who were there. And I've been able to find where some of the bodies have been relocated, the headstones were relocated too. But every now and then, as I said, I have a visitor who says, hey, my bones have surfaced. Can you please go and find them? So, that all happens too. They have so much information in that area that now it's basically, I report it and they're like, do whatever you want with it, which I find very sad.
Yeah. We hear so many stories like that too, right, Phil?
Well, yeah, I have some questions. You said they tell you about their bones?
Yeah.
Who?
The energies will come to visit me, and
And
they'll
so
tell me
someone who's
exactly.
deceased comes
Yes,
to you and tells you something moved my bone, or there's my bones, or right? Is that what I'm hearing?
yes, that their bones have been exposed or pieces of their coffins, um, and then I go and I would actually locate them.
And you actually locate them.
Yes. Now, if
Well,
there's bones or anything like that, of course they are reported.
so you have those abilities where if you're in the area, they come through, or you do have to be in the area.
No, I don't have to be in the area, and they will come through. Most of the time, it's at night when I'm doing my meditations or I've just completed, a or something. And then I believe that opens things up where they can come in and communicate. I can't or turn it on. I have never really learned how to open myself up where I can be in a room with somebody or go to a location and it's like, boom, it's automatically there. Sometimes it does happen if they're really strong energies. That can happen. For example, there was a young lady I used to work with. Every time I walked into her area, I felt her husband's presence, and he was always saying, "Do you see my wife? She's beautiful. Isn't she beautiful? She's just so beautiful." And then when I mentioned it to her, she said he used to tell everybody that. So I can't control it yet,
No,
though.
but I guess where I'm going with this, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe you. But then someone would ask me, a skeptic would ask me, well, if that's true, then how come missing people that were murdered don't go to the mediums with abilities and ask them to find the bodies that are never found? And there's many, many bodies never found, missing children, missing people, and years later we find out that they were murdered.
Mm-hmm.
So why is that?
I just feel, as I stated, each energy has its own way of communicating. Some of them don't know how to communicate. Some of us don't know how to listen. And I don't believe that you necessarily have. Okay, here's what I've learned through my research. Everybody, every single one of us, whether we're believers or not, we all have the ability to listen and to communicate with different energies. If we really, really wanted to open up our minds to it, we all have the ability to do it. But we also all have different upbringings. Some of us are told it's against our religion. It's the devil's work. You don't want to do that. Others, out of curiosity, if you put yourself in that field and you really want to communicate, and as we said, you keep putting that intention there and that energy there, eventually you will make communication.
I agree with you. And there's still a lot of question marks, but I know what you're saying. It's one of those things where people with missing children, would ask, why can't you find my kid? It's been 20 years, 30 years. Why? And they go to different mediums and psychics around the world. It's broadcasted, and especially the Natalie Holloway case, no one's ever found her. Nobody. No one. Nobody. And I asked myself, and I do believe you, but then I asked myself, is it because the spirit doesn't want to be found in such a way where it's going to bring only remorse? Or is it that there's not enough energy to find that person? There's a lot more questions than answers, but I do believe you, and I do think that people with ability should come forward and use their gifts and try to help grieving parents and people who are going through these tragedies in such a way where we can actually give them valid evidence of that person. And again, a lot of the communications with people talking to loved ones that crossed over, that's validated. I mean, there's some names out there that are pretty big, and they validate this person's talking to you and asking about you. That's crossed over. They are saying hello and all these different things, and they're telling them things that only the parents would know, which is fascinating. The the bones and the skeleton, I guess this is something different now I'm hearing. I like what I'm hearing. I want it to be more publicized with people with abilities to help those in need of such a loss.
I do have something to say about that. To be honest, we've had people on our show that have said this. I also think there are a lot of mediums that do come forward that are not getting acknowledged, and no one's taking them seriously. Now we're coming to the age where people are, the authorities, they are taking psychics and mediums much more seriously now, right? But there's been stories where people have come forward and they're ignored. They're ignored.
I have to jump in here really quick. You know what the problem is? Julie and I are paranormal investigators. You're a paranormal investigator. You have a team. Well, one of the problems is that paranormal investigators aren't taken serious enough because it ain't science. It's hard to prove. But yet, we capture voices from nowhere, the unknown, as we're asking questions. Clear voices. And I'm not talking through a spirit box. I'm talking through a digital recorder where you have a clear EVP, which is electronic voice phenomenon for the listener out there. That's what that means. And we're getting responses. Now, certain religions say you're talking to the devil. You are, because there's no such connection, which I don't believe, of course. And other religions believe that you're talking to interdimensional beings that are mimic, and there really isn't that person. Is there a way that we can one day validate who we are speaking to, because they do know that we're asking for them?
I've thought about that too, and that's one of the reasons why when my team does some investigating, like for example, Family Bullies AZ, they're in a location where just a few houses down from where they're at, a little girl was kidnapped and murdered. And this little girl communicated with me. So I took the time to get to know the family a little bit, because, and I do this with everybody when it's, when something comes to me, a message comes to me, or an energy comes to me, hey, can you get this message across? Or, hey, I just want them to know this. I get to know the person first, because I want to know, what is their belief system? How would they react to this? Because there's times, where I've seen that somebody will come up to them and just say, hey, so-and-so, this happened and blah, blah, blah. And these people completely freak out. And so I try to get to know the people first. When they come to me, people do come to me at times for healings or for, hey, can you help me with this? Can you help protect me? Can you come help, clear out my house? I feel that there's something negative there. I try to get to know them first. And then that helps me to approach the situation better. Do I tell them the messages that I'm getting, And a lot of times their want is so bad that because they're missing someone so much, that they turn, the house creaking, they feel that there's some sort of communication. So instead of going in and, into a situation and say, nope, there's nothing here, there's nothing, there's nobody here, what you're hearing is this, this, and this, I try to be a little bit more sensitive to that and explain, if you just talk to them, just, if you start feeling that energy, if you start feeling that you're missing them, just say it, you miss them. And it kind of helps them with dealing with their current situation rather than just, nope, you're wrong. And like you said, a lot of people don't take people with abilities seriously, because you do have so many people out there who haven't taken the time to study the science behind everything. I don't do orbs because a lot of times you see they're dust specks. I've gone as far as learning when you're outside, depending on what type of camera you use and what type of season it is and what area you are, some cameras can pick up moisture droplets in the air. They pick up dust, they pick up dirt, they pick up pollen. So I'm not the type of person who does orbs. Although I'm not going to sit here and tell someone who comes to me with a picture of orb, no, you're wrong, and there's no such thing as orbs. Because if it's going to help them with the situation that they're in, especially when it comes to having lost someone, you know, I don't want them I don't want to send them in a direction where it's going to be worse for them.
Right. Yeah.
I like that approach that you have.
Thank you. Now, in your years, I mean, how was it that you developed your ability to communicate better when you're out on investigations?
Are you asking me?
Yeah. Oh,
I love it.
Because you're asking me, a hardcore New Yorker who doesn't believe anybody about anything? Is that who you're asking? Let me give you an answer to that. I'll tell you what. In the beginning, I knew I was dealing with paranormal experiences, but I didn't believe it. I didn't believe myself. But I had a lot of teams come through and meet teams. And, you know, I'm Italian, there's old Italian saying, believe none of what you hear, half of what you see, and somehow something's made up. In point blank, right? But when toys go off by themselves with no batteries, you have to ask yourself, what's the possibilities?
Yeah.
And that opened up my insight to, wait a second. There's some true evidence out there now. Let me get into this. And then from that point, I realized something, that spiritual realm can manifest in such a way where they can manipulate electronics, cell phones, computers, radios, cars, anything that has electronics. And when you know that and you have experienced that, then you try to dissect the paranormal investigators and psychics and mediums along the way, and you see that there is compelling, validating evidence that they are picking up. And then I started to become a believer. And then the experiences myself and Julia, we were dealing with, we started to validate, wait a second, psychic said this, and this happened at another time. So here we go. Now it's all forming together. And there's still so many non-believers out there, but there's more believers that are starting to come through. It's real. To the listener out there, paranormal phenomenon is real. The spirit side is real. If you haven't not had an experience, maybe there's a reason for it. Maybe you're not supposed to have this calling in this journey right now. But I can validate and a true testimonial that it is real. And for years and years, Julie and I says, you know what? We live in a haunted house, and we took a lot of heat saying, oh, it's fake. There's no such thing. And you know the nonsense that people throw out there. So I called everybody's bluff, and I got the best paranormal teams that we knew of at the time to come down to our house and go live to the world. And let's see what they say. And we shut a lot of mouths up. At the same time, we've proved the reality in such a way where it does exist. And that's why we do this show, to have great people on like yourself and psychics and mediums, because it's about helping others. You see, every investigation that's done helps another person or someone along that line who, that was my great-grandfather, that was my great-grandmother, or my sister, or my brother, or a friend or cousin that crossed over at this location. Thank you. And that's what we get back, you get back, and teams get back. Validating evidence. Along the way, of course, there are negative energies that do get picked up, low vibrations, and sometimes there are unfortunate events, but that's not all the time. Most of the time, the spirit's trying to say, hello, I'm trying to communicate with you. Thank you. So it's a great journey. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, and I'm glad that I learned the hard way. I did. And one of my testimonials, I tell people, be careful with the Ouija board. Yeah, it's just a board. It's made by who? Milton Bradley or Parker Brothers or one of those companies. But it's the intent that a person has to open up the doorway to the other side that you don't know exactly what you're calling in. And therefore, you should seek the advice of someone who's been in the field, knows the protection laws, and knows how to communicate and validate with loved ones.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the Ouija board, because I have a lot of people who come to me about Ouija board. I explain to them, like, I said, there's a lot of intent. And because of movies, because of, social media, all this other stuff, usually people go into a Ouija board already with the intent and the energy that something bad is going to happen, something negative is going to come through, and that's what they pull through. Yeah. So I tell them, until you're ready to actually sit there, open your mind and with the positive energy and think of positive, vibrations. It's a lot, because you have to keep that negative at bay, because if you go in there with, I'm thinking of negative, negative is going to happen. Negative is what you're going to get.
Very true. And it's very important to teach our children not to play with Ouija boards, because
I see that on TikTok, young kids play with the Ouija board and they have these challenges, and then I just posted something on my Facebook not too long ago where all these girls got affected and they had to go to a hospital. It's not a joke. Let me tell you something. Oppression and possession is not a joke, and you could take your life or someone else's, and I've seen it happen. I've seen people get taken over where they do acts of these crimes, and there's no coincidence. There is no coincidence. The fact is, you're tampering with something you don't know what you're doing, and you're welcoming something in, and that could be an unfortunate situation with the intent and belief that you do have. So there's that fine line. And hey, as we have a few minutes left in the show, give some people like some validating words of wisdom in the paranormal.
Actively listen. If you feel that, that somebody is trying to communicate, or you have energies around you, don't automatically assume that they're evil. It is very rare, but it does happen to encounter something evil or negative. Learn to meditate and to listen to the world around you. If you're missing somebody, meditate on that person and the happy times that they've had. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. There's so many people out there in the paranormal field. You can contact me on my Facebook, Angela Torres Moreno. I will answer your questions for you. Contact Julia or Philip or anybody out there, that has been validated before. Don't believe what you see on TikTok. Don't believe or follow things on TikTok. Don't put yourselves in dangerous situations without somebody who has the experience with it. My grandson, Nathaniel Moreno, is part of my team, but he has also done a lot of research and he's learned a lot. And don't take a 5-year-old to a ghost hunt. No. Honestly, don't take a 5-year-old to a ghost hunt.
I agree 1,000%. Thank you so much for coming on Horsefly Chronicles Radio. We just hit the mark of 9 o'clock. Julia, wrap it up really quick. Before you wrap it up, Julia, I got a couple of words. We are giving away a $100 gift card from the Horsefly Chronicles home if you can tell us the name of the first entity that was discovered here by the first paranormal team. If you do that, email psiracusa4@yahoo.com. We will say your name next week's show and send you the $100 gift card. Having said that, Julie, wrap it up.
All right. Well, I just want to give a shout out to, let me see, Virgil from England. So thank you for listening and joining us in chat. And join us again next week, same time. Special thank you to Carnation for fully sponsoring the show from day one. We love them. Don't forget to watch us live on Roku, streaming from your TV. So that is very exciting. And join us next week on 105.3 and 107.7 FM from New Orleans. And stay tuned for Trish Mel with the Missing Piece. Yay.
Have a great night, everyone. Thank you so much to our guests, our listeners. We love you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you.